Brilliant. Very good, thank you.
Yeah, let's hope.
Oh, she's trying to be nice.
So we can just start doing it.
Yeah, because it's not using the web camera. It's using the and then the Microsoft. So everybody else.
Okay.
The whole apartment, so good. Don't you for a while? I know. Oh, yeah, that's right.
You can jump in and see us. No, Marcus. You're to see the names and the papers and documents I've seen thousands of times. Nice to meet you. I thought you'd be a lot older. No. I thought you'd be like a historical person.
Carl Holmes.
Yeah, Carl. I think Carl. Yeah, well, you guys are retired. But you
Yeah, I'm Sandy.
Sandy, yes.
Yeah, I think we did.
Well, you guys pipe up.
We can just move in here.
You guys pipe up with it.
I know. I
Right.
bet you
Oh, did she already? No, it doesn't matter.
I don't know how long I've done that. I even know.
Oh, man.
Stop me.
They're all speaking by Sandy.
Yeah, it stops me big time.
You gotta come here now. Okay. Not saving for anybody?
Yeah, I took
Okay.
someone out for their first race run this year. It was really
Yeah.
fun.
We're
Yeah.
good people.
Was there fun? It was a fun.
How did you do?
Yeah, I had a good time. I was so tired.
This is a can.
She missed a bell by 4 minutes. And she was kind of fit, but she was so tired of race. She took her skis off to go up and down. I did a first race to go down, the one to the ponds way back.
Oh, yeah.
But after that, I never did again. But then I had to ask her a big question. Did the woman come and pass her at that point? But she did, that woman was always the number. Because that would have been painful. Well, for me, I don't know if it would have been for her, but.
Trail.
So you went out when it was icy and everything, huh?
Well, that was 3 weeks ago. I only went out twice.
Yeah.
I hurt my shoulder shoveling.
Oh, gosh.
Payment on it.
Oh, helping to get the trails right.
Cost me a loan.
Oh, gosh, that's frustrating.
Yeah, I was the only one there, and I was busting my butt.
Oh, my gosh.
Because we were already 20 minutes late.
Okay.
They were crossing the road on the gravel before I got there.
Oh. So which road were you at? Up by the trail? One of those
Just
roads?
after the trail.
Okay, yeah.
You know, coming down the hill.
Yes, and that's,
People were jumping.
oh, that hill is so fast right there.
Kids from high school were going up. And
Marcus in a dress up.
I know.
Wow.
I know, it feels really weird.
What's your position?
I'm the university organist.
Yeah.
Okay.
When did you retire?
99.
It was that late? I was there until 99.
Only I was in the education department.
That's right. Your name is all over the world.
I wrote a lot of policies.
A lot of different records. In fact, I think I'm actually.
Maybe there's stuff I'd like to go back and look at, so that'd be the place to go.
Oh, yeah.
Well, yeah.
He used to be really scary.
Really?
Yeah, one summer I did. Oh my gosh, I'd
Really
shaken my
scary.
boots.
I
Yeah.
was very detail oriented.
Well, and what my job was that summer, I had the most important job at the
Or not
I was,
students.
well, I was in the dean's office and I was the person who would send the letters out to the kids coming to orientation.
Really?
And I had the count. I had the count. Norma would come over my shoulder. That was the big indicator of fall enrollment. It was on my desk. That's why you were hovering all the time.
Well, I was hovering to make sure that you're typing it the way I gave it to you.
Did you do the HGIS report?
What would that be?
The higher education now, it's something that reports on enrollment demographics.
No, I don't know. Probably that was, Very rational.
Norma's a stickler for proper English. Know something better be done right.
I'm still that way.
And that little report that went to you, your secretary, I forget Jane, and what was your Esther? They did not want to have any like whiteout or anything. And they would not type it for me. They would watch, start over, start over, and start over to get that. Oh, that was quite a summer.
That's pretty true. Put up with me.
Carl, you better sit out.
Oh, yeah.
Where's Sue?
She's, probably just about to get off the plane.
Oh, I thought she was here tonight.
She was going to be.
Okay.
We have refreshments back there. We've got coffee, water, sodas, various sodas, and some cookies. Help yourself,
I might
please.
have something.
I thought she'd go.
Right.
She's not doing that.
Yeah.
Are you?
Doubles.
I think it's one. I'm there, he said, really very thoughtful.
Well,
That tells you something, huh?
Yeah, well, we've had.
So how did you store refreshments, Mike? How did you store
I
refreshments?
got a nice dean.
You got what?
I've got a nice dean. Oh, so it's all right for me to spend a month.
Since they're already out here, so just move into the back. They're like in the first. Well, I have to go. I have to go to the basketball game. My basketball class because we like. Yes. Yeah. For like an HPX class, and we had our teacher 2 weeks ago, and so she said we had to go to one of the upcoming women's games. So just like, oh, you guys pick one of the next 4 upcoming games. And like one day she said, okay, you guys have to go to this game on Thursday at 8 p.m. And we have to answer like 10 questions about the game, like what happened and stuff like that. And the women's game, she's probably just trying to boost her business. Like, otherwise I
I'm
would
gonna
say,
throw this in your trash here, but I think I know.
No trash over there.
I couldn't find that. Everything was. No, no, they try to tell me, well, it just feels nice to have something. That was the,
The basketball game, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was on TV, I saw that.
That clock's a little fast.
Then can't you? I always was a kid. It's got
oh,
snow.
maybe that's outside. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's like a Jeep or something in the back. No, I also have some of my things. There is yeah, and each one, they would launch that.
Yes. And then that helps. Yeah.
Our presenter this evening asked that we wait a couple of minutes because she has some friends that are still planning to be here. Wants to make sure we show up. So continue to talk amongst yourselves and get those refreshments too. We've got 4 up here. Just be ready. Okay, so. Okay, good evening, everyone. I got the okay to go ahead and go and get started. Welcome to the University Archives. Actually, we're the Central Upper Peninsula and Northern Michigan University Archives, and this is our first installment in our program we call Evening at the Archives. And we're actually going to be doing 3 of them this semester. This is our first one, and then the next one will be on March 29th. Is that right? Yes. Okay, yes, March 29th. Yours truly is going to be giving a talk about immigration and market iron range, miners, and impact and nature of immigration and conditions on the market iron range on March 29th. This is part of the Diversity Readers Project. And then in April 15th, I'm hoping Leslie Larkin's 2 classes will be coming in here and giving a presentation on research that they've been doing. The purpose of Evening at the Archives is to highlight research projects and activities that are going on. And I really like to focus it on students. That's why tonight's very special, because we have a student assistant in the archives giving the presentation tonight. And I'm always missing something when I'm doing these things, and I don't want to make sure everybody knows about the refreshments in the back. And of course, the big deal is we're live on Facebook. Hi, Mom. Isn't that something? I'm still geeking out over this new technology. I just can't believe that we can go live that easily on Facebook. So we're broadcasting all over the world, and it'll also be recorded if you want to go back and take a look at that. Kyleigh has been working very hard to create this presentation. Kyleigh Sapp is from Grand Rapids, downstate. She is in her 2nd year here at Northern. She's an international studies major. She is also a member of the Black Student Union. And by the way, stupid of me, this presentation actually is in celebration of Black History Month as well. So without further ado, I'd like to turn it over now to Kyleigh.
Hi, everybody. I'm going to grab my notes really quick. Okay, so actually I'm just going to grab this one. So originally why I was asked to do this presentation by Marcus is because when earlier this year, fall 2017, I, along with some of my friends from the BSU, attended a hockey game. And while we were seating in the student section, we were asked to leave because Northern had sold our seats. So a woman had come up to us and said, "Will you please leave your seats?" And we said, "Well, the students, or this seat says student see. Like, this is the student section. I don't feel like we should have to leave. That was not a good answer because she then got the public safety student officer involved. So public safety student officer came down. She wanted us to leave too. And we said, I'm sorry, but we don't want to leave. We got a lot of support from the students that were behind us. And they were telling us that if it was them, they would not have left either. But then the public safety police officers got involved. And they came down and they told us that we were going to be escorted from the section, which was really embarrassing because we also had some first years with us, and that was their first hockey game ever. And it was really disheartening. We didn't get to see anything. We got there an hour early, sat in those seats for 30 minutes, and then were asked to leave. So it was really disappointing, and it went viral on Facebook, not due to any of the kids from BSU, but because a kid that was sitting behind me who saw the interactions that I had had with the police officer, he posted an angry post on Facebook, and it like got shared, I think, like 70 times. It had like 100 and something reactions. A lot of people were talking about it, including my boss. And so I came into work and I was like, oh, I saw you commented on that post. That's so cool. And then he was like, you're going to do a presentation. So that's how I got here. That's why I'm doing this. And I know that there's already the student protest that we did, like the presentation from 2015. That was more of an overview of all the protests from like 67 to like 71. And they were more like, they were Vietnam, they were about McClellan, faculty members, and then they also touched on the civil rights ones. Mine is more focused, obviously, on civil rights and the BSA at the time. And it's not going to talk about the administration very much. It's not going to talk about the correspondence that happened very much. I really wanted this to be more from a student perspective. So I looked at mostly just the student newspapers, because that was what at the time people were reading. That's at the time where they got their information. Unless they were going up to the students that were affected by it, which is kind of intimidating. That's where they got their info. So that's what I wanted to use as my resource for this whole presentation. So that's where most of my sources are from, and that's how I understood more of what the atmosphere would have been like. So I think that's a good enough presentation. Yeah, let's get started. So here are the major people that are involved. So I wanted to put Black Student Association up there because I'm going to say BSA a lot, so you'll know who I'm referencing. This is just a picture from like 1969. They're putting their fists in the air, which is kind of cool. And then we have Alan Nimi, who was the dean of students, and then he turned into the vice president. And then we have John Jamrich, who was the president at the time. Actually, he had just become president. He was like in his first year when almost all of this like civil rights stuff really took off, which was, I'm guessing, really intimidating for him to deal with. Seeing as, again, it was, I think he got like reined in as president in the summer, and then it happened, like most of the stuff happened in December. So months into his first year. So the first major event was the Pan American Basketball Sit-In, December 10th. 125 to 150 Black students came together, and during the national anthem of this game that was really hyped up, people were really excited about it, they came in with their fists raised and then they sat down on the court, which is kind of a statement, I would say. And a lot of the crowd was upset, which I think is kind of understandable, because they were really excited about this game, and here's all these kids ruining the game, right? They're making it so that nobody can play. It got canceled. Pan American left. They stayed on the court, I think, until like 9:45. And so it was a really big deal. They were demanding to speak to the president, which is kind of, again, forcing the president's hand. It's not a polite thing to do. But I think what kind of gets ignored a lot of the time is why. So we see these people, and they're demonstrating, and they're making us angry. But why are they doing this? And they were doing it because of a lot of incidents that were happening to them on campus. There was a lot of mistreatment by the security, a lot of incidents, random searches, needing backup for random stops. One incident of 2 girls trying to get into their hall and then being stopped because they didn't believe they lived there. So a lot of things were not good. And then also they were struggling to get employment opportunities on campus. And then also the Marquette atmosphere, or like the Marquette community wasn't really hiring them, so a lot of Black students weren't able to make money while they were here. So it was really getting like frustrating for these students, because not only are they being mistreated, they're also not able to provide for themselves better. And also these searches and these incidents, they would file reports and they would go and ask people to do an investigation, but nothing was coming of it. They're kind of getting the cold shoulder from the higher ups. So it was really getting to a point where they had to force a hand from the president. And so they ended up, this is just the agreement that they reached. There were way more demands. Melvin Payne had like 4 demands, and they were usually almost all, I'm gonna kind of be general on them because they're almost all the same. They want better treatment, they want more Black staff, they want this, they want that. It's all the same, but again, so they don't usually get met. But the president did meet with them, and the next day, and they met up and they talked about these demands, and they did agree on these 4 demands. And they did have the establishment of the Human Rights Commission, which essentially was just random students, and they're put in a commission, and they would listen to the testimonies, and they would actually do an investigation, right? And then they would give recommendations to the president on what they think was fair or what they think was not fair. And then President Jermich agreed that he would try to have proper investigations looking into what these officers were doing. Better security system for like the dorms. If an RA says, yes, this person lives here, you should probably listen to the RA, because I'm guessing the RA is not like lying. And then job opportunities on campus, they ended up having like more opportunities. They promoted it more. They also had more Black students hired in the on-campus offices. So the Human Rights Commission, the reason I put quotations around unbiased is because this commission was made because the Black students were upset. There's no way that this commission was going to be totally unbiased. They were going to have a bias, and so I think that's something that needs to be said, because every time you hear about them in the newspapers, they're on the side of the BSA. Now that's a good thing, kind of, because it means that there were people that sympathized and empathized with the Black students. But at the same time, I'm guessing a lot of people didn't take them seriously because they clearly had a bias. It wasn't like they were random people picked off the street that they could have not known who these people were. And then the student attitudes, there's a lot of, if you go read the older newspapers, there's a lot of like editor's mail. People could submit their own stuff and they would like read about it or like write it into the newspaper. And if you read through a lot of these like editor's mails like sections, a lot of the students were not happy. Like they were saying that Black students did it for attention. They're saying that Black students were ruining the fun. They're saying that they were being dramatic, essentially. But then there are also a couple opinions that were really in support, and that's when we saw the formation of the Friends of the BSU, which is kind of interesting, or BSA. Because like right now, I'm in the BSU, and we don't have a Friends of the BSU. You just come. If you are white or whatever you are, POC, whatever you are, you can come and you can support us because it's just a club. But at the time, I think it was a bit more extreme, and especially in the climate that we're in, Nixon, Vietnam, people were very in their ways, and they didn't really want to negotiate a lot. So I think the Friends of the BSA was a good thing, but it's kind of sad that they had to feel like they had to make a whole other club for Friends of the BSA. And then the Marquette community was also unhappy. They were older folk who came to a basketball game. They're excited Pan American was here, and for the most part, they were not split. They were pretty much like, that was not cool, guys. Why did you do that? And you can read that in the Mining Journal, which is again on our website, where the old student protest website is. You can see all the resources. A lot of people submitted their editor's mail, and they were not happy with the BSA at all. They kind of called them militant and like, I think they said that they're militant and wrong in their logic and decency. Wrong in their logic and decency. They were not decent to us. But then nobody cares that, again, maybe people weren't being decent to them. And then we have the Job Corps girls, which this is going on throughout. So like a lot of these are really overlapped. They happened like this within like 2 years. So the establishment of the Job Corps was in 1966. Northern was the first campus to have a Job Corps in the whole country. And it was really like hyped up the first year that it happened because it was cool. We also got a really big grant for it, like $2.something million. So people were really excited. A lot of the administration was supporting it. And then it kind of took a turn once the girls actually got there. There was room in the facility to have 300 girls. 60% of those girls would have been African American, and they would not have been educated, or at least they wouldn't have had their GEDs. And then the purpose of the Job Corps was to give them vocational training so that they could go on and get jobs. They could go on and get better, right? So the community was not totally for this at all. There were some rumors that would go around about these girls. I think it's also that people weren't used to in the UP seeing Black kids, like young people, loud, having fun, going on dates. A lot of the K.I. Sawyer guys would come up and have dates with these girls, and they would cause disturbances, which is being loud and in public, and they kind of started getting this bad reputation. Something that they were called was Edgar Hardin's whorehouse, which is really unfortunate. Like, these girls are just trying to get better training, they're trying to make their lives better, and they're getting called really mean names because they are young people going on a date. And also another thing that was said was that they didn't see the point of kind of, why are my tax dollars going to these people? Why are my tax dollars paying for this girl's education? That doesn't make any sense, which I think is something that still gets said a lot. But I mean, if you think about it, the Job Corps was meant to change these people's lives, give them something better. And they weren't really given that chance. And a lot of the Marquette community turned away from them. And I read in an article that they were treated even worse than like the football guys or like the students at Northern, because at least the students were there for a reason, right? They paid tuition, they're here, and they're getting, like, they're educated. Or the football guys, they're gonna win us a game. The basketball, they're gonna win us a game. But like these girls, well, what can they offer us? Not diversity, apparently. I don't know. But people really weren't happy with them. And it ended up getting shut down in 1969. John Jamrich kind of was already wanting to shut down the Job Corps due to the grant or the money getting smaller and smaller and smaller. Their placement was not the highest. I think we were second to the bottom of all the Job Corps. It's not super great. And that's when Nixon cut the funding. And so in June of 1969, all the girls were sent home. So it's kind of sad. But also, if you think about that, 300 girls, 60% of them African American or Black, gone. Like that, from the community. They're no longer a problem. So that's a lot of like support that the BSA would have had. Same with the K.I. Sawyer guys. They're not coming up here anymore, or very rarely. So now the community is shrinking. And you can see that really as you continue to read the articles, if you ever go through them. You can tell that people really started to band together even more because they had to. They no longer had as many of them around. Like, you don't walk around campus and see as many people that look like you anymore, and it's scary. And I think that was kind of like the turning point into people getting more extreme, as well as like the BSA really coming together, because the BSA was comprised of all these kids from different clubs. We had I think we had 6 or 7 totally Black sororities and fraternities. That's not including the athletes. That's not including the other clubs. That's just sororities. So you're talking about kids that are picked from all those clubs, plus the Job Corps girls, and plus the K.I. Sawyer guys that would have come up and helped. But they're gone. They're wiped out. So then we get to the case of Charles Griffiths. This is a good one. So this guy, he was caught with a girl in his room, which was against the rules at the time. So he did break a rule. I think that needs to be said. He did break a rule. So he was given a case with the Student Judiciary Board, I think. And the thing is about this is that the RA got an anonymous tip that he had a girl in his room. But this girl was also the ex-girlfriend of the RA. And it was also a white girl in his room. That's not really a good combo, you know? That's not really gonna work out for you, man. The girl, her identity kind of stays hidden. They never write her name anywhere. But it's clear that this RA knew who it was. She also ran down the stairs. Like when they tried to get her to stay, she ran away so that, you know, we don't know who it is technically, but they knew who it was. And he had his hearing in which he claims, and a lot of people would claim, was very biased. He wanted an open hearing, and he was told he would get an open hearing. He wanted an audience. But then at the last second, they weren't allowed to have an open hearing. I think he only had 2 supportive people in the room with him, and the rest, it was very close. It was administration, and then it was like the Student Judiciary Board. And he was suspended. He was given a suspension. And he was supposed to graduate, I'm pretty sure that semester or the next semester. And they suspended him for 2 semesters. And that's kind of devastating. Anybody would know, if you're a student, especially now, money is not just free-flowing. And so if you were to leave school, there's a high chance you would never come back. And that's still the truth today. So it's kind of sad. And the BSA heard this hearing, or heard about the hearing and heard about the determination that he would be suspended, and they got upset. And that's when Pat Williams, who was the leader at the time, decided that they should do something about it, right? And so they went to K Hall, 70 to 100 of them, and they sat for 19 hours. And then they soon moved to Alan Nini's office. So they squeezed all of themselves into an office, and things got a little hazy, They were waiting to hear, because they had talked to John Jamrich about trying to appeal, because they had told him that there had been some questionable remarks made during the hearing. And John Jamrich truly was trying to be fair. I think that's the one thing that needs to be said. He was doing his very best. It was his first year, and he was trying to hear both sides. And yes, I'm sure he had his own biases, but there's a lot of pressure coming from everyone. So when he heard from the BSA president, which was, I believe, Pat Williams at the time, that they believed that there had been some wrongdoing in this trial, he sent a memo, and you can look at this on the website again. He sent a memo saying, I really think that we should reconsider, like, we need to relook at this case. And they did, and it was overturned. He was no longer suspended. But the damage had already been done. They were in the office, and there had been $250 worth of damage. I know this picture looks so bad. It looks so bad. But there was $250 worth of damage. And a lot of the damage was from having 100 people in an office. If you have 6 kids sitting on that table, there's going to be some damage. There's like one of the things that was recorded was one of the, on the typewriter, one of the keys was messed up. It got like dinged so it couldn't go down anymore. Like papers were thrown so they couldn't be used. Like very little things that maybe if you would have heard it, like if it would have been listed out, people would have been like, okay, so. But because this is the headline, this is the image, you're like, what did those kids do? Why were they so crazy? What were they doing? And I think that's what media really does play a huge part in what people believe. And these headlines never stop, like they just never stop. And I think this was kind of the turning point on which people really started to get totally split. Either they were down with the BSA or they did not like them at all. And I put 2 sides, 1 truth for a reason. And I think that's because right now I'm really siding with the student side, obviously. But again, there's also the administrative side. And there's also the real truth, which is somewhere in the middle. We're never going to know the real truth, but we have stories. And we can try and combine them and try and use common sense to think of why people do the things they do. Why do people react the way they react, right? So this went on for months. There were months and months of headlines. Oh wait, I'm gonna go forward really quick and then backwards so then Marcus can talk. But like these were the headlines. Just like months until I think May or April until the trial was done. Because by the way, 24 of the leaders of BSA were charged on the campus they would have to do the student judiciary one. And then 6 people were actually charged with kidnapping and I think other charges like assault and property damage, other things like that. And the reason why is because Alan Nimi said that the black students held him hostage in his office. This is, I can't say if it's the truth or not, but what I can say, from what I've read, what was submitted by the BSA president into the newspaper, as well as the collective thoughts later in the year, it seems as though he might have exaggerated a little bit, just a little bit. Also, tensions were high, and it was the middle of the night, and these students weren't supposed to be in there, and there was 100 of them, and everybody gets nervous. So he goes into his office, and he wants them all to leave, and they said no. And he kept pestering them, he kept yelling at them, and they're all sitting there because they've been there for 12 hours. They're not going to leave now, sorry. So somebody said, I don't remember who, but somebody said, sit down. And so he sat. And that was being kidnapped. That was being held hostage. And he went to court. But it only was in court for 1 week because there was a mistrial. Because the jurors, well, 2 of them had to be dismissed because they had bias. And then there was also rumors that jurors were talking outside of the case, of the trial. So, and also the Mining Journal was printing a lot of like slanted information. So this trial kind of just got knocked out of the wind. And President Jamrich didn't pursue it further. He kind of let it be. Because essentially, they had made a public humiliation of these students. Also, these students were still going to school this whole time. So like they're going to class, and people are reading about this in the newspaper. They're reading about their peers in the newspaper, calling them militant and extremists, and they're ruining our campus, and what are they doing? And they have to keep going to class and going to work and trying to be a normal student, normal 20-year-old, normal 18-year-old. It's really a lot of pressure. But I think I want to go back and say the story, or have Marcus tell the story of David Williams, because he's going to come up later. And he was also a major leader during this whole time. Yeah, so why don't you tell that story, Marcus?
So there's something that far more dramatic and really amazing happened during this sit-in in the Dean of Students office. Before I tell the story, though, I just want to mention that as the students were marching across the UC, they actually intended to go to Jamrich's office and present him with their list of demands. And as they're literally walking across the UC, they changed their mind because, as Kyleigh points out, Jamrich was still basically in his first year and he was trying to balance things. So they didn't really want to get him really angry unnecessarily. And so at sort of last minute, they decided to go to Alan Nimi's office instead. And they walked in and read their demands, and he started yelling at them, and that's prompted them. Now this is from David Williams, who I'll tell you about in a moment. He's one of the leaders, along with Pat Williams, of the BSU at the time. They decided, well, screw this then, we're just going to sit down and occupy the office. So what happens is they sit there, as Kyleigh said, for quite a long time. It's late into the evening. Jamrich is taking a hands off. He's not intervening in any way. The police are not there. They're not trying to force the students out in any way. He's hoping that they're just going to get tired and they're going to leave. And that's a reasonable assumption. But sometime late in the night or early in the morning, Jamrich had finally had enough. Now this story is related to me, was told to me by Robert McClellan, who some of you probably know. We're not talking, there was a major protest on campus concerning him a couple of years earlier, a year or so earlier. But he was the faculty advisor. He was a professor of history, and he was the faculty advisor of the student union. He was there at the time that this incident occurred, and he was telling me this story when I interviewed him in 1998 as part of a paper that I wrote about the early formation of the faculty union here. So what happened was, sometime early in the morning, late at night, early in the morning, Jamrich had decided he had enough, and he went down to the office to confront the protesters. Well, it's not clear who exactly the leader was that was there, but the story is from McClellan that it was David Williams. And David Williams is a very big guy. And John Jamrich, I'm sorry, is sort of if you've ever seen him, he's a short, sort of slightly built man. So you've got this confrontation. Jamrich comes in there, and it's Williams who comes out to, to meet him. And you see this big man. I mean, he's towering over Jamrich. Jamrich is looking up at him like this, and he's using his index finger on his chest, yelling at him, saying, "This has got to stop, cease and desist, it's illegal." And he goes on for quite a while. And the entire time, Williams is saying nothing. He's just simply looking down at him like this. And this is the dramatic part. Jamrich finally stops. There's a few moments of silence. And Williams, now imagine this for a moment. Let's say this is Fritz Erickson and somebody else, other group is LGBTQ group maybe or something that's confronting it. Williams grabs Jamrich by the shoulders and lifts him completely off the ground. And McClellan, who despised Jamrich, thought it was hysterical because his little feet were dangling like this, Said, "You could see it, it was so funny, his little feet were dangling." This is McClellan telling you the story. So he lifts him off the ground so that they're eye to eye. And Williams looks at Jamrich and says, "F you," and puts him back down and goes back into the office to continue the protest until eventually they did desist. Now, I had heard, I had this story, but I couldn't get a hold of Williams at the time. I couldn't get a hold of Jamrich. So I didn't use it in the article that I eventually published because I couldn't get confirmation. I couldn't find any documentation confirming this. And it wasn't until about 5 years later when Dr. Jamrich himself is visiting the archives. And we have a few quiet moments, and I relate the story to him, and he confirmed that it happened. But it gets more complicated because 2 years ago, I had the honor and privilege to actually interview David Williams in the office here. And when we got to the oral history interview at that point, and I asked him and told him the story, he looked at me and said, "I just don't remember that." Now, to give David some credit, as Kyleigh mentioned, there was a Pat Williams who was also a leader of the group. So is it possible that both Jamrich and McClellan confused the two? I don't know for sure. I've never been able to get a hold of Pat Williams. I don't know if he was as big as David Williams. But the story gets even funnier because flash forward to 1999, it's the centennial celebration year at Northern, and I'm relatively new, and they put me on the committee because I'm the archivist, and I'm on the subcommittee to help develop a series of a symposium series for that year, for the centennial year. And we were going to have, each topic was going to be about some subject or issue in higher education. The first one we were going to do in the fall of 1999 was about diversity in higher education. So I remember sitting around in the table and we were brainstorming, well, because what we wanted to do was bring alums back to campus who had become very successful in that issue that we were going to have them talk about. And so we're sitting around the table and everybody's trying to think, who are we going to bring? And I pipe up, "Hey, let's bring David Williams." And everybody looks at me like, "Who?" And I tell them this story, and they're like freaking out. And they, sure enough, we invite him, and he comes. Now, this is really important because when he left, he swore up and down he would never come back to this school. And he actually wrote a treatise, which we have and we digitized, called "Anatomy of a Racist University." He would never come back here. So I was kind of surprised that he did accept. And so he came, and we had this symposia in the Peter White Lounge. And again, David's this big guy, right? And he comes up to the podium, just like this podium, And I remember he gets up there, and he's towered over and he kind of looks, and he's looking out at the crowd like this, with this really incredulous look on his face. And then he finally says in a big, booming voice, "Do you people remember me? Do you remember what it is I did when I was here?" And then people were like, "What?" There were probably some oldsters like you guys that remember that. But it was really funny because, and he's been back since. He got the Distinguished Alumni Award, and he was here a couple of years ago, like I said. And this is a man who essentially assaulted the president. But when he left Northern, do I just hit the? So before I do that, this is David Williams actually right here, and this is the basketball game where they all walked out and sat down. And I asked him, why were you doing this? And he told me because off to the side where he's looking at, there were a whole bunch of other black students who were going to come out on the floor to join them. And he was telling them to go back because he was scared, SHIT, less, that the 3,000 audience, the fans in the stands were going to attack them. And he was really worried about it, and he was trying to say, go back, we don't want any more out here. And Jamrich said the same thing to me. If you see some of our other pictures of that event, you can see him running around. He was panicked that the audience might attack the black students at the time. So, what do I do? This
Next
go,
arrow.
huh?
The over arrow.
The over arrow? Oh, there. And here's David Williams today.
Oh, wow.
And David Williams is, do you have this on here? No. David Williams today is the Vice Chancellor and Provost for Vanderbilt University.
Cool.
He left here, had a distinguished career in law and other things. And at one point, he was the Vice President for Finance and Administration at Ohio State University as well, at the time that we invited him to come back. So I think it's just a great story. It kind of adds to this. But it's also a good archival type of story because it's there's some mystery still behind it. Who was it? Was it really David? Was it Pat Williams? Somebody did something. So it kind of adds a little flavor to the whole thing. Turn it back to Karen.
He really wanted to tell us, sorry. He tells it really good. He interviewed them.
Get me in there somehow.
Yeah, he interviewed them, so next time. So yeah, these are all the different headlines that were really big at the time. Also, a lot of these, I think, again, I want to mention John Jamrich again, because again, people were really split about him. Because again, it was his first year, he was nervous, there was a lot of stuff going on. But then if you read the Sharp Exchange, it says, Jamrich and several blacks following the sit-in, didn't you in fact, Dr. Jamrich, say to all the students, after all I've done for you, why did you N-words have to do this to me? That's supposedly what he said in the office. So again, if he's doing this, saying that, I mean, that might be a reason to pick up the president. I'm not an advocate for physical violence, but that might be something that would maybe trigger that. And then he's very careful with his wording. If you go back and read a lot of the newspapers, he sends in a lot of memos to the student newspapers so that people will know what he's saying on these issues. And he replied in court, you can't perjure yourself, I have never since my arrival at Northern Michigan University until this moment called a black person a N-word. And I want that a matter of record. And that's very carefully stated. I have never since my arrival at Northern Michigan University said that. I've never since my arrival until this moment. I mean, that's something I picked up on right away. He's also done something like that before during the Pan American whole fiasco. He sent in another thing to the newspaper where he was thanking, he said, I want to give my commendation to the students and community in the crowd for holding back, I think is something along the lines of what he said. Which to me, when I read that as a black person, I was like, you're thanking the crowd for not attacking people because they were sitting on a court? That's a little, I mean, it's a good thing that they didn't because it would have been really bad. But also, you're a president, he said my greatest commendation. Like, wow, you're really proud of people for not attacking other people. And he, again, if you go and read through, he's done this several times. He's very careful with his wording. And if you read through it, you can really see it. I'm not saying that that indicates that he's a racist. I'm not saying that indicates that he's prejudiced. I'm just saying at the time, people were raised in a different way. And like, it was more normal to say and do different things. And so he might have had a bias before. And that can still bleed into when you're trying to change and trying to be better. He was, I would say, from what I read, he was trying his best to be as fair as possible to everyone. He was trying his best. But the Mining Journal was not. They definitely were very, very slanted in what they were saying. So a lot of the community was very anti-BSA, anti-Black students, but a lot of the students were still pretty split. Yeah. We're gonna move on to when there was guns on campus. Yeah, so this is something that's not talked about like ever because NMU doesn't like to talk about things like this. If you go on our student website page, you can, if you go under the last big event, so the sit-in, it briefly talks about this, but it's not a lot. And it's because it's embarrassing. We had guns that were allowed on campus. They were allowed in your rooms. They technically, I think, were supposed to be checked into desks at the dorms, but students, it wasn't super enforced. Students, obviously, we're a very hunting area, very sports, outdoorsmen, like, yeah, I like to go hunting. So it was normal for students to keep rifles, like, in their cases in their room. Well, when all this stuff was happening, it's not really that great. The tensions are high. This is not just in Northern either. It's all over the country. It's the civil rights movement. So tensions are high all over, and to have guns on a campus, probably, especially in a living area where people are forced to be around each other and maybe someone's annoying you, it's probably not smart to have a gun just sitting around. But what kind of triggered this event? I know that this says K-Hall firebomb. I'll talk about that in a second. But like, if you look in at the bottom, it says Jamrich okays black call for no guns. And the reason this happened is because the Augusta riots, and I'm not sure if any of you will remember that. I didn't even know what it was. So in Augusta, Georgia, there was a mentally disabled teenager who was arrested, I don't know what for, and he was in jail. He died while he was in jail because of falling out of his bed, okay? He fell out of his bed. But when they looked at the body, the back of his head was caved in, his skull. He had cigarette burns all over his body, and he had like rashes on his back, which doesn't really sound like falling out of a bed, ever. What bed are you in? Especially in a prison. I don't know what you could have fallen onto. The story quickly changed to his cellmates murdered him. They did it. Again, I don't really think that's what the people believed at the time. So they rioted in Augusta, Georgia, and six unarmed men, black men, were shot. They didn't have weapons. They weren't coming at the police. A lot of them were shot in the back. Not all of them, but a lot of them were shot in the back. So probably running away, going away, turning away. And it was really scary. And this spread fast. Even though it was like an embarrassment for Georgia, the news still spread fast, especially to people who are, of the same skin color. They hear about this stuff and they're like, oh man, we got to be careful. So this spread all the way up to Northern, and they heard about it, especially because Pat Williams, again, he was a major leader. He was really involved. At one point, he had invited a Black Panther to come and talk at NMU's campus. That's also in the newspapers. That is not talked about ever, but a Black Panther did come up here and actually speak with the BSA during the trials for the police sit-in. So kind of interesting. So I'm guessing he was probably one of the first ones to hear about the Augusta riots. And they went to Jamrich and they wanted him to shut down campus for a day. They also wanted a couple other things, which I think were a bit extreme. But again, I don't know how, I do know. The tension was really high. So for them, they wanted to be able to leave school. There was like a couple months left. They'd been through all these trials. They'd had all these big incidents. People were not happy with them being there anyway. They wanted to be able to leave their classes and not totally fail. They wanted to just take what would be today like a W. So essentially it wouldn't hurt them, but it definitely wouldn't help them. It'd just be like they can come back. Jamrich said no to both. Approximately 6 days later, Kent State happened. A bunch of white students protested and the campus was closed for a day. So the Black students weren't really happy because it made it seem like Jamrich saw the Kent State shooting as way worse than the Augusta shooting. He didn't take the Black students seriously. He took the white students seriously because the white students did demonstrate. I think they did a sit-in in the K Hall. And so this kind of really made the BSA kind of start thinking that Jamrich isn't on our side anymore. Like, he's not going to listen to us. And so they went to the Detroit Free Press. They told the Detroit Free Press that it was unsafe for them on campus because there were guns everywhere. And just to put some validity into what they were saying, there had been incidents that were never investigated, or maybe were never, like, I don't know, people didn't believe them, but Black students had been shot at on campus when they were walking from, like, parking lots. I think one was he was walking from a parking lot to his dorm and he had been shot at, and another one was walking through campus, because the campus back then was like really spread apart. I don't know why, but like the residence halls were over here and their classes were way over here, and it was when he was doing this long distance right here he had been shot at. And then also something I didn't mention earlier, but like the Job Corps girls, before it got shut down, there was a rally of like 300 students that were trying to get Jamrich to keep it. They wanted him to fight. They wanted him to write into like Nixon. A lot of these demands were a little silly because, again, young people have a lot of hope, and I think they have a lot of heart too. And they wanted him to write into Nixon and ask him not to shut down the campus because a lot of students at that time were still really on the side, especially the Friends of the BSA. They had a lot of demands that they would also submit along with the BSA demands, usually just in support. And they wanted Jamrich to stop the closing. But in response to these people rallying around the Job Corps girls, some students were displaying their guns in their windows along their Confederate flags. So while the students are here, the windows lining the students are not very happy. They're not supportive. So I think there was a lot of reason for these students to feel very unsafe on campus, especially as tensions were rising and rising. And I think this is really the final rift, because also this K-Hall firebomb, it was assumed that a Black student did it. The bomb didn't actually go off. They threw 3. That's why 3 of the windows were broken. They did not go off. And I think they got made fun. Whoever made it got made fun of because it didn't work, I think. Don't quote me on that. Again, this is very hush-hush. People didn't want to talk about it. I'm sorry, I lost my spot. So yeah, the Detroit Free Press heard from the BSA, and they were printing to, obviously, Detroit, where a lot of these kids were from, and where a lot of people are, just a high concentration of people. They're saying that NMU was an unsafe campus, that they were essentially oppressing the Black students on campus. They were really going far with it. They were really trying to show support for the Black students on NMU's campus. The Mining Journal caught wind of this and got really mad. Again, we already knew that they were not friends with the BSA, and they started saying that the BSA was trying to ruin Marquette's reputation and the reputation of NMU as a whole. They were trying to essentially tear the institution from its roots. They were really going, the Mining Journal was really going at it. And I think this truly is the final rift of when people were over it. They were done talking about civil rights. They didn't want to hear it.